Thank you, Pastor Aaron, and good morning. It's been great to be with you this week and share on a topic that's not often discussed in church. It's a situation or a topic we face every day of our lives. Some of you struggle with it significantly, others maybe to a lesser degree, but we've been talking about anger this week. And as I was shaking hands this morning and I said, introducing myself, one lady says, "You're not a stranger. I've been watching you online this week. So you're already up to speed. And you know what we've been talking about." But for those of you that are accustomed to a Sunday morning sermon, I actually do preach, but this has not been a preaching setting. It's been more of a teaching setting. And so that's what I'm going to do again this morning. And we're going to pick up on the ramifications of what anger can do. Anger, when in haste, can create some very, very hurting words. What do you do? How do you handle hurting words? So I want you to turn in your Bibles to 2 Samuel. I'll give you a little bit of the background as we go. If you're an Old Testament, and if you've read your Old Testament and you're up on your Old Testament, this is not new to you. But of course, David, the son of Jesse, of the tribe of Judah, that was to ultimately, through who the Messiah would come through, was just a shepherd. And God called him from the sheepfold and had the prophet anoint him as the future king of Israel. Only one problem with that. Israel already had a king, and that was Saul. And Saul and David served Saul. He was faithful to Saul. You know all the times he could have killed him, but he didn't. He would not touch the Lord's anointed, as he said. This is God's king. He set him up, and I won't touch him. And in the proper time, God will place me in the seat or the role as king. Of course, Saul didn't see it that way. Saul was highly jealous. He chased David all over the wilderness. He tried to kill him in every chance that he could, but he failed. And so finally, you know the battle between Saul and the Philistines, and Saul falls on his sword. He and his sons are killed. And finally, David is brought into the kingdom. Now, after David is brought into the kingdom, and he has served God for some time, there were rules for the king. If you go back to Deuteronomy, there were certain rules that kings were supposed to follow. They were to take the words of the law, write them down in a book, and keep them with them at all times. And then they were not to multiply silver and gold. They were not to multiply horses. Now, why in the world would that matter? Egypt is the one that raised all the horses. Egypt was the superpower of the day. And God said, "I'm not interested in you, my people, multiplying horses and chariots. I don't want you to rest on the arm of flesh. I will fight your battles for you. Don't turn to man and man's weapons. Let me do it." But there was also another commandment there, and it was not to multiply wives. And God has never approved of polygamy from day one. But he has winked at some of the polygamy that took place in the Old Testament with the kings. It was very much a part of their culture for the kings to take more than one wife so they could have many, many sons. Just as they say in England, an heir and a spare. But they needed a few more spares than they thought they did. So that was the culture and the custom, and God overlooked that. However, you know the story of David. When he should have been out in the springtime leading his armies into battle, for some strange reason we don't know, the Bible doesn't tell us, he's decided to stay home. And he couldn't sleep. And so while his troops are out fighting the enemies of Israel, David is wandering around on the top of the palace. And there must have been some sort of a flat roof with a parapet wall. And he looks over the wall into the courtyard of one of his subjects. And there he sees Bathsheba in the moonlight bathing. He sees this beautiful, beautiful naked woman. And in that moment, he yields. And as the king, he sends for her, and she has to come. He spends the night with her. He sends her home early the next morning, but unbeknownst to him or her, she goes home pregnant. You know the rest of that story. God brings Nathan the prophet in the scene, and he tells that little story of the rich man who had many sheep, and of the poor man who had only one little sheep, one little lamb that was like a pet to him. And the rich man had company, and he needed to feed his guests, so instead of taking one of his many sheep, he went over and took the little lamb out of the arms of the poor man and slaughtered it, fed it to his guest. King David, who was a poet at heart, a lover of literature and a romanticist, he clenched his fist, he stood up, I can see him standing on the throne, and his face turns red, and he says, "That man's going to die." Nathan said, "You're the man. You're the man that did it." And he did. He had taken his soldier's wife, had the soldier killed in battle, guilty of murder, guilty of adultery. And God said, you're not going to get by with this. He was forgiven. Psalm 51 is the prayer of repentance. You can read it. But sin always has a payday. There are consequences. Whatever a man sows, that's what he's going to reap. And David began to reap a harvest. And part of that harvest immediately was the child died. Of that illicit affair, the child died. And then his own daughter, beautiful daughter Tamar, was raped by her brother Absalom. And then, her brother Amnon. And then Absalom calls a feast, sets it up so he can kill his brother Amnon that had raped his sister Tamar. This is the final judgment. You know the backstory, the reason David is fleeing. You're going to pick up that story in just a moment. Absalom starts talking to the people of Israel. Rob, it's the most subversive political campaign that ever took place. He starts talking. He was a beautiful, handsome man, lots of hair, handsome in his countenance, smooth with his tongue. And he was able to sway the people of Israel. You know, if I was the king, you wouldn't have to wait so long on your judgment. Things would be fair. It wouldn't be like the way it is now with this old king called David, my father. He's old and tottering. He needs to be out of the way. But I'd help you. And lo and behold, he set the trap, and he overthrew the king, the Secretary of Defense, the military got behind Absalom, and they overthrew them. And David is now fleeing for his life from his own very son. And he's fleeing down through the valley. And this is where the story picks up in 2 Samuel chapter 16. And the first character and the central character in this story, you have to know this, he's a descendant of Saul. And when Saul's kingdom was taken away and given to David, all the descendants of Saul lost their status. They lost special privileges. They lost unbelievable wealth. They had connections to the kingdom, and those connections were lucrative. Now they're impoverished, and David is on the throne, and now David's fleeing for his life. So let's pick it up there in 2 Samuel chapter 16, verse 5. When King David came to Bahurim, there came out a man of the family of the house of Saul, whose name was Shimei, the son of Gera. And as he came, he cursed continually. And he threw stones at David and all the servants of King David. And all the people and all the mighty men were with him on his right hand and on his left. Can you imagine how angry a man must be to throw stones at the king in the presence of SEAL Team 5? That's what it was. I mean, these were the most mighty men in the kingdom. These were his bodyguards. This was SEAL Team 5. And here he is. Sin is insanity. And he's throwing stones. And Shimei said as he cursed, get out, you man of blood, you worthless man. The Lord has avenged you, on you, all the blood of the house of Saul, in whose place you have reigned. And the Lord has given the kingdom into the hand of your son Absalom. See, your evil is on you, for you are a man of blood. Then Abishai, the son of Zeruiah, said to the king, why should this dead dog curse my lord the king? Let me go over and take off his head. But the king said, what have I to do with you, you sons of Zeruiah? If he is cursing because the Lord has said to him, curse David, who then shall say, why have you done so? David said to Abishai and to all his servants, behold, my own son seeks my life. How much more now may this Benjamite? Leave him alone. Let him curse, for the Lord has told him to. It may be that the Lord will look on the wrong done to me, and that the Lord will repay me with good for his cursing today. So David and his men went on the road, while Shimei went along on the hillside opposite him, and cursed as he went, and threw stones at him, and flung in the dust. I want you to turn over to chapter 19. Chapter 19, verse 15. The battle's over. Absalom lost. And David is returning to Jerusalem to sit on the throne. So the king came back, verse 15. So the king came back to Jordan. And Judah came to Gilgal to meet the king and to bring him over the Jordan. And Shimei, the son of Jerah, the Benjamite, from Bahurim, hurried to come down with the men of Judah to meet King David. And with him were 1,000 men from Benjamin, and Ziba, the servant of the house of Saul, with his 15 sons and his 20 servants, rushed down to the Jordan before the king. And they crossed the ford to bring over the king's household and to do his pleasure. And Shimei, the son of Jerah, fell down before the king as he was about to cross the Jordan, and said to the king, let not my lord hold me guilty, or remember how your servant did wrong on the day my lord the king left Jerusalem. Do not let the king take it to heart, for your servant knows that I have sinned. Therefore, behold, I have come this day, the first of all the house of Joseph, to come down to meet my lord the king. And Abishai the son of Zeruiah answered, shall not Shimei be put to death for this, because he cursed the Lord's anointed? But David said, what have I to do with you, you sons of Zeruiah, that you should this day be an adversary to me? Shall anyone be put to death in Israel this day? For do I not know that I am this day king over Israel? And the king said to Shimei, you shall not die. And the king gave him his oath. There's been a little poem that has made its way around for most of us. The little poem, sticks and stones may break my bones, but words will never hurt me. I don't know of any little rhyme that's ever more untrue. Sticks and stones can break your bones and make your body sore, but the damage that words do will hurt you more and more. Words hurt. And I'm speaking to some people this morning who have felt the angry blow of someone's words, either deliberately said, carelessly said, or unintentionally said. Words have lasting impact. They damage. But just as words can damage, words can be powerful in the sense they can make a positive impression on you that you will never forget. I remember some words that were spoken to me as just a child in grade school. They were such kind and confident and loving words. I have never forgotten them till this day. I remember a college professor in college who I was in a class under him, and we left the class together, and he turned to me, looked me in the eye, and he said something unbelievably kind to me. I have never forgotten those words to this day. Words are powerful. Just as you can remember kind and gracious words, some of you have an echo in your head of the words that you heard somewhere along life's way that were hurting and damning and powerful. Words hurt. You know, the Bible tells us that King David was a man after God's own heart. The kingdom that David set up was unparalleled. He had the blessing of God. As a matter of fact, David is the sort of the watershed king. He sets the benchmark for every king before and every king after. It's him. And it's hard to understand all that David ultimately got himself into. But the one thing you can say about David, in the case of Saul, Saul only hardened his heart and refused to repent. But David, though he made some serious sins, he always humbled himself under the hand of the Lord and said, I was wrong. Forgive me. And he sought repentance. And there's something about that heart that God said, he has a heart like me. But this is a low point in David's kingdom. He's in exile. He's fleeing from Absalom, his son, and he's been deeply humiliated. And on the way out, we read the story. One of the descendants of Saul is throwing stones and cursing him. You have to understand the context. There's probably not any more way to insult anyone in that context than what he was doing. Some of you are old enough to remember when George Bush was president, the younger George Bush. And he was either in Jordan or Saudi Arabia somewhere giving a press conference, and one of the reporters took off his shoe and threw it at the president. In that setting, you can even go back to the Old Testament where one of the prophetic Psalms, David said, he has lifted up his heel against me. David was saying, I have been belittled and cursed in the most vile way possible. Throwing that shoe was the absolute worst way to insult anyone you could. And what Shimei was doing here was the most vile insult. He was cursing God's anointed, and he was throwing dust into the air, and he was casting stones at David. Unbelievable. And the question is, why was Shimei so hostile? What in the Word was bringing this out of Shimei? As a matter of fact, some of the accusations that were being made at David were ludicrous. Of all the people in the world that was innocent of the blood of the house of Saul, it was David. Saul had been delivered into David's hands many times in the caves. He could have killed him more than once, but he wouldn't touch him. Even the time when he got a little mischief and he said, I'm going to cut off the hem of his robe just to show him I could have got him. Even after he did that, his heart smote him and he was grieved that he even did that to Saul. So why was Shimei so angry? Well, I think I've explained it at least enough that he had lost his position, he had lost his place, he had lost his means of wealth. He had lost so much because of Saul's fall, but he was blaming the wrong person. He should have been pointing his anger at his heritage at Saul and not at David. But the truth of the matter is, we've all faced those sort of things. You have been the recipient of blows and words that really should have gone somewhere else, but you got them. You got in the crossfire, and you're the innocent victim. Or it may be that for whatever reason they meant to direct those words at you. But when that happens, why does that happen? Well, just start looking behind the criticism to the heart of the critic. And one statement that has helped me so many times: hurting people hurt people. People that are hurting hurt others. And I often hear the places I've been, the positions I've held, I've often heard a lot of words that were hurting. But I like to look behind them and see something's wrong there. Hurting people hurt people. And Shimei was deeply hurting. But you still have to ask yourself the question, why did he turn on David with such vicious words at this point? We know he was hurting. We know he'd lost all of that, but In his mind, there's three things. He thought he could get by with it. He thought there would be no consequences. David's fleeing, Absalom's on the throne, and I can do this. I can finally get this gall out of my spleen, and I can say what I want to say finally, and I'll get by with it. He also knew the taunt would hurt David the most just now. David was humbled. He was fleeing. He was actually fleeing barefooted, another sign of deep humility and brokenness. The king fleeing barefoot. Can you imagine Joe Biden fleeing the White House barefoot? No such thing would ever happen in our world. But David was humbling himself under the hand of God. He knew that his past was not spotless. And God's loving and gracious hand was giving him one last spanking and chastening for what he had done. And Shimei knew the taunt would hurt the most. But here's the thing, he also believed God was on his side. Do you know that in the body of Christ and in the world that you and I live in, you guys are involved in community leadership, state leadership, and we're all interacted in many things. There are people who actually believe God's on their side. And that justifies them in saying whatever it is they want to say to straighten anybody else they want to straighten up out. God's on their side. If you've never read it, you need to read Abraham Lincoln's second inaugural address. How many have read that? That's got to be one of the most powerful speeches ever given by a president. And in that speech, he says, we know the other side thinks God's on their side. And we think God's on our side. But the real question we need to take a look at is, are we on God's side? And sometimes our lips speak words they should not speak because we think God's on our side. But what was David's response to all of this? And that's where I want to go with you today. How did he respond to this? We're talking about a warrior king here. We're talking about a man who has killed literally thousands. I don't even know if we have any equivalent of it today. I doubt there's a soldier anywhere in the armed forces of the United States that's actually killed by hand with a sword thousands of the enemy David had. And this man's natural response would be pick up a sword and take his head off. But he goes completely silent. Why was that? Well, what can you and I learn from that? What's there for us to learn? Well, the first thing is this. When hurting words come your way, when criticism comes your way, when biting things come your way, before you react in anger, before you take somebody's head off, or let your spouse take somebody's head off, look for the morsel of truth hidden in that criticism. You realize Shimei said something to David that was true? He said to David, you're a man of blood. And God said the same thing. God told David, no, you want to build my temple. And that's what David wanted to do. He got all the materials together. Solomon actually built it, but God said, David, I'm going to honor you for your intention, but you're a man of blood. And I'm not going to let you build the temple. I've had some what I felt like were unfair criticism. But I got some advice early on in my ministry, just in my 20s as a young man. Someone said to me, when you feel like you've been unfairly criticized, you take that criticism, you kneel down and lay it out before the Lord and search for the grain of truth that criticism's wrapped in. And that's true. There's generally a grain of truth wrapped in all of those uncalled for words. And if you'll do that, it's amazing the good you'll get out of that. As president of a college of young people for 22 years, I had hundreds and hundreds. Matter of fact, I still hadn't read them all, and I've been gone 7 years. I had boxes of notes and cards and things. I called it my sunshine drawer. And I kept all of that stuff. And I said, one of these days I'm going to get around to reading all of that. Still hadn't got there. I've read some of it. I'm saving it for dark days, and I'll read it. But I want to tell you something. Also during 22 years, I got some stinging hot letters. And do you know what helped me the most in 22 years of being the president of the college? You think it was my sunshine drawer? No. I received more help by stinging criticism. It hurt. I didn't like it. My first reaction was, this isn't fair. They don't even know what they're talking about. But I learned early on, take the criticism, get rid of the emotion, get rid of the superfluous words, and try to find the grain of sand that's of truth down in that criticism. Look for the morsel of truth that's hidden in the criticism. Number 2, develop a tough hide. We don't need to have a China doll fragility about us all the time. For crying out loud, quit acting like you're a victim of something. Stretch your shoulders, square your head, get your head up, and try your best to do some adulting and be a man, be a woman. Develop a tough hide. And go to the Bible. When you hear somebody say something about you unfair, before I came as president to the college, I asked the Lord to give me some passages of wisdom, and this is one He gave me. Ecclesiastes 7:21 through 22. Do not pay attention to every word people say, or you may hear your servant cursing you, for you know in your heart that many times you yourself have cursed others. Now, don't take the word curse to mean profanity. That's not what it's talking about. It's talking about saying bad things about someone. I went to at the college, there was the second floor was the suite of offices where the administrators were. My office was here. My secretary was here. There was an open area. Then my executive vice president was here. And then you go by that, you pass his door, and you go out to where the coffee area is. And so I went out to get some coffee one morning and got my coffee. And on the way back, my executive vice president was talking real loud on the phone. His door was open. I wasn't listening. I didn't stand there and listen. But he was talking so loud I could hear it. And what I heard, he was talking about me. And he said something to a salesman that it wasn't very flattering about me. And I heard it when I walked by. And I forgot about my coffee. And I went to my office and I said, when he gets off that phone, I'm going to bring him in and peel his ears back. And no sooner had I said those words, the Holy Spirit quoted this verse to me. He said, don't pay attention to every word people say, or you may hear your servant cursing you. And don't you know that in your heart you've said things about others you didn't really mean? So cool your heels and drop it. It was the right thing to do. Number 1, I knew him. He was committed. He was loyal. He loved me. I may have needed to be thrown under the bus at that moment. I don't know. Probably did. But I moved on. It's a great verse to keep in your pocket. Number 3, keep things in perspective. David's son was in rebellion against him. His very own son was rebelling against him. His very own son was sleeping with his wives on top of the palace in front of all of Israel. And he's going to worry about Shimei cursing and throwing stones? For crying out loud, no. Put it in perspective. You don't want to die on every hill. Pick your hills you want to die on. Pick your battles. Make sure it's significant enough to respond to. Keep things in perspective. The other thing is learn to hold your tongue. We learned that this week talking about anger. I think Fern was the first one to bring it up. Just learn to hold your tongue. You don't have to say everything that's in your mouth. Proverbs, the great place of wisdom. The heart of the righteous studies how to answer, but the mouth of the wicked pours forth evil. Proverbs also says it like this: a fool gives vent to his spirit, but a wise man quietly holds it back. You want to drive somebody crazy? Let them unleash a volley of criticism on you, and you don't say anything but a smile. It'll drive them nuts. It'll drive them, they don't know what to do. What in the world do you do with somebody who's not going to lash back? St. Augustine said it like this. He said, "O Lord, deliver me from this lust of always needing to vindicate myself." Are you listening this morning? You don't always have to have the last word. And the Lord knows I like to have the last word, but you don't have to. You need to exercise a discipline of not having the last word. You need to exercise the discipline of not vindicating yourself. Truth always comes to the surface. I was counseling a couple that went through not a real pleasant divorce. And I mean, she was making up one lie after the other, after the other, after the other, a whole narrative of lies. Attacking him at his workplace. It was awful. He said, "What in the world do I do?" And he took whatever action he could take. He went to his lawyer and said, "You tell her lawyer she's got to stop running me down." So he took the appropriate action, and then I said to him, "Truth will surface. Give it time. Just give it time." That's the most painful thing in the world, to be patient and wait on truth to surface, but it will. And 2 years later, guess what? The truth surfaced. He was completely vindicated, and it was time for her to suffer the consequences of telling lies and those sort of things. Lord, deliver me from the lust of always having to vindicate myself. But the fifth thing, try to understand where the person's coming from. I don't know, it's several years ago at the college, something very unusual happened in the state of Ohio. Florida has hurricanes. Mississippi has hurricanes. Louisiana has hurricanes. Ohio does not have hurricanes. But guess what? Some strange freak of nature blew up from the coast. I think it was something out of Louisiana or Mississippi that came through. And the force of those winds got all the way to Cincinnati and literally blew trees down on our campus. We were without power for a week. We had to shut the college down. We were completely powerless. We didn't have generators big enough to run the campus. And so we had to start sending kids out into the local homes. Some kids could go home, others couldn't, so we would farm them out. And we asked people to take them. And we said to them, you know, if you'll take them, we'll pay you so much per day for their food and shelter if you'll just take them. And so we did. We were paying people, and we said, all we got to do is turn. How many kids did you have, and what were your bills and so forth. And we had one family that had always struggled financially. They were quite poor. They took some kids. I think they took a couple of kids, and they had several kids of their own, and of course them. And when they turned in the bill, they just didn't turn it in for the 2 kids they took. They turned in a bill for everybody. And my secretary went ballistic. She said, how could anybody be so dishonest and claim to be a Christian? And I said, write the check. I said, here's why. No, it's not right. Their ethics have a lot to be desired. That is not right at all. However, I don't think you understand when people are desperately poor, how they think, and how they can sometimes justify something like they're doing. Now, that was the way I put a spin on it. You don't even have to agree with that. Sometimes I don't agree with myself. But you understand, what I was trying to do is, where in the world are they coming from? These people took people, they probably didn't have the money to buy groceries for themselves, much less somebody else. So we just paid the bill for everybody. And that's okay. That's okay. I'd rather be abused like that than to abuse somebody else. But try to understand where the person's coming from. You don't justify sin. You don't accept sin. You don't tolerate sin. But you can understand where they're coming from. Number 6, see God's hand behind it. You say, I haven't done anything. Why would God let somebody whittle me down to size? Here again, I've learned a lot of lessons. Maybe I needed to learn a lot of lessons, maybe more than most people here, but I had to learn some. And one of the gifts that God has given me, and I used quite frequently as a young preacher, I had the gift of speaking, communicating in a very powerful, blunt way that, boy, when I spoke, it sounded like God Almighty had just said whatever needed to be said, and that was it. And I had exercised that a little too much. And my wife said to me, she said, honey, you don't know how hard you sound. You don't know how strong that comes across. Well, God knows my heart. She said, I can't see you hard. All I can do is hear your words, so cool them a little bit. Good advice. But I was pretty hard. And all of a sudden, one day, a guy came in with his son in registration. All new students had to meet the president. And they came in right in the middle of registration. I had lots of kids to see. They came in, and he started in on me. I mean, he as they say, he cleaned my clock. He said everything. He didn't like me to start with, and he said every unkind thing he could think about me. I don't think I've ever been talked to like that in my entire life, not even by an enemy. And it was over. He left. And I was deeply, deeply wounded. And I was literally a grown man, almost brought to tears. As I was sitting there feeling sorry for myself, almost to cry, God said to me, what he said wasn't true, but you deserved how he said it. What he said wasn't true, but you deserved how he said it, because you can say it the same way and you haven't been able to hear yourself. Now you know how it feels. Now you know how it feels. And boy, did I ever. See God's hand behind it. Romans chapter 8, verse 28, it's in our English translations. And please understand what I'm about to say. I don't think that is the best translation in most of our English translations. It says in most of those translations, and we know that God, help me out, I'm trying to quote it. Somebody help me quote it real quick. And we know that all things work together for good to them that love God, to those who are called according to his purpose. That's our present English. But there's actually a better, older translation. I don't actually believe that translation's correct. And we know that all things work together for good. No, they don't. They simply don't. But here's what the older translation reads, which I believe is a better translation. It said, and we know that God is working in all things for our good. Now that makes perfect sense. It agrees with the rest of the Bible, and it agrees with the character of God. I don't believe everything that comes your way is good. But I do believe this. I believe God is at work in everything that comes your way for your good. And he will take that and use it for your own spiritual benefit. So see God's hand behind it. Maybe accept it as the chastening from the Lord that you need. Number 7, exercise forgiveness and move on. Exercise forgiveness. Forgive. And move on. Number 8, don't get stuck in a place of woundedness and become dysfunctional by reliving the experience repeatedly. I have watched people who've been deeply hurt, and they become a victim for the rest of their lives. Oh, they hurt me that time. That's what they said to me. And they get stuck. They get stuck somewhere, and they can't get over it. Don't do that. Let the Holy Spirit heal. Let people help you and move on beyond it. Now here's another question. What if the criticism about you goes viral? We have Facebook today. Fortunately, David didn't have Facebook. We do. What if it goes viral? Well, here's the deal. If it's true, if the criticism about you, that it's painful and it hurts, but if it's true, own it. Own it and apologize. Eat some humble pie. If it's not true, I'm not going to say you can't defend yourself. I'm going to say for the most part you're going to waste your time. Let time live it down and let truth surface in the end. Now, what can the rest of us do? Let's just say somebody takes your pastor on. They've really got after him. And it wasn't true. And they start right here in the church. Oh, did you know I saw Brother Aaron? Here's what you can do. Stop gossip in its tracks. Stop it. Somebody comes up to you, they want to tell you some little tidbit of juicy information. Stop it right there and say, you know what? I'm not the person you need to be talking to about that. Number 2, don't give it any soil to grow in. Number 3, tell the person you're going to check it out. If you want an old trick, just pull out a little piece of paper and a pen and say, look, would you write that down so I can get this real careful, and would you sign it? They won't. They won't. Write it. Would you write this down and sign it? Because when I take it to the pastor, I want to get it exactly right, and I want your name under it. And then confront the one spreading it and say that is absolutely inappropriate. That should never, ever happen. What do you think when you see that? There was an old lady in a particular church who was known to sort of be the town gossip. She was always sticking her nose into other people's business. One day, she accused a man who had just been recently converted of a few weeks, new member of the church. She accused him of being an alcoholic. Told her friends he's an alcoholic. You know why? Because she saw his car parked in front of a bar. The new member's response said, well, I simply parked my car there in front of the bar because it literally broke down, and that's the only place I just pulled over and stopped. That was it. She told everybody he was an alcoholic because his car, I saw him in front of that bar. He didn't say anything to her. He just kept quiet. But what he did, later that week, he quietly parked his car in front of her house about 9 o'clock that night, walked away and left it all night long. And it cured the gossip. You and I live in a world that's angry. We've been talking about that. We live in a world that out of that anger flows a lot of hurting words. Words that should not be said. Words that are not true. And sometimes they're focused on you. What do you do? Well, I've tried to give you what I believe are 8 simple ways to respond. And then there's the rest of us. The words got said about Rob, and they were very unkind and very untrue and I saw him parked in front of a bar. And then you hear it. And Robert says, I don't believe a word of that. I know him. But would you write down your, I want to get this right. Write it down here and sign your name. Because I'm going to go to Rob, and I want to make sure, did they get your name right? Let's go over there in front of him. I did that once. There was a preacher who kept criticizing one of our professors at the school. I mean, he went all over the country. Blame me. He said, he's nothing but a closet Calvinist. He's this, he's that. He's got it wrong on this. everywhere. So that preacher was in town in Cincinnati. Called him up. I said, hey, I hear you're in town this week. Would you come speak in chapel? Oh, that was such a great honor for him. He had never spoken in chapel. And, oh, yes, of course, I'd love to. And I said, chapel's at 11. I want you to hang around for lunch. Will you do that? Yeah, sure, I'd love to. So he came, he spoke in chapel, and I took him to lunch. And I had a table all set up in a private dining room, and we sat down to lunch with a professor he's been criticizing. And I said, here he is. Here's what you've been saying. Here's the man. Now you say it to his face. That guy got so mad at me, he would hardly speak to me for years. But I'll tell you what, as my old Alabama papa would say, it cured him from sucking eggs. It got him dealt with, and he had to confront his words. And the professor was as cool and calm and just explained it and cared. Oh, it taught that young preacher a life lesson. You're going to have to face your words someday. You may not face your words down here. You may get by. You may run somebody down. You may tell a lie on them. You may hurt them. And you may get by with it. Nobody may ever confront you, but guess what? The Word of God says that at the judgment, you will give an account for every word you have spoken. So better be careful what we say, right? Now, questions, comments, insight. As I told you, this isn't a sermon. There's no altar call this morning, unless somebody needs to repent desperately for what they've said. But any questions? We've talked about anger. We've talked about how to handle hurting words. You've heard what I've had to share. Any questions, concerns? Yes, ma'am. Okay, sure. Oh, no doubt about it. They mean to hurt, right? They say them with the intent to hurt. That's the worst kind. But it happens. What do you do, though, when they do it? What do you do when they intentionally hurt you? They intentionally, it happens all the time in politics. I mean, it's as common as breathing air. So what do? Do you let your zeal consume you on the inside and waste all your energy trying to attack somebody, trying to justify, oh, that's not true what they said about me? I'll tell you what, early on in my ministry, I tried a few witch hunts, and they don't work. You can run it down and oh, no, they didn't mean that. They wouldn't have ever said that about you. You can try all that stuff. It's a waste of time. But I'm telling you, truth has a way of surfacing. It does. And it's also helpful to let somebody else defend you. Let a person of real sterling character stand up and say, I know this person. That is not true. That is a lie. Here are the facts. In politics, I know you kind of have to defend yourself to a great degree. But that's why I'm not in politics. I'm glad you guys are. Great comment. Thank you. Anybody else? All done? Yes. Yes. That's why David got the kingship and his brothers didn't. God, in fact, knows our heart. He knows our intentions. And there's great comfort in that. Man doesn't. He looks on the outside. He listens and hears things. Great comments. Anybody else? All done? Ready to go get that extra hour you lost? Yes, ma'am. No. No, there's not going to be separate judgments, but that's a very interesting insight. We're going to face our words. It's the way the Bible said. It's the way the Bible has of expressing that God's not going to just let things slide by. Those things are going to be said, and some of them that are foolish. Quite frankly, let me back up just a step. People who've said really, really hurting words, like Christians who may have said something very harmful. Fortunately, we have the Holy Spirit living in our hearts. And if we're paying any attention, He's going to come along and say, shouldn't have said that. That's wrong. Don't do that. And it gives you an opportunity to go to that person and say, I'm sorry. I should not have said that. Then it's clear. But people who refuse to do that are going to face those words again. And in the judgment, it's going to be part of what condemns them. Now, it's possible some people who said it in ignorance, unintentional and ignorance, in the what we call the judgment of rewards, it's going to be like wood, hay, and stubble. Those things are going to be burned and cast away. But it is a sobering thought. Really, you really want to dig a little deeper here. We talk about words. Well, they're just words. I had kids tell, it's just words. Where does the Bible say words come from? The heart. Out of the abundance of the heart, the mouth speaketh. The tongue is just a big spoon that reaches back down in our heart and dips up what's ever there and throws it out. As Vance Havner would say, the old country preacher, whatever is down in the well comes up in the bucket. So we can say, oh, those are just words. I didn't really mean that. God knows I didn't mean that. Well, words have meaning. And where do they come from? They come from the heart. And those are indicators. Something may not be right down here. Good insight. Good question. Thank you. Really good. Words matter. All done? Ready to roll? Yes, sir. Yeah. Absalom? Well, he was killed. He was killed in this battle that we read about. What actually happened, he was known for having this massive amount of hair. Remember, he had this. They used to cut his hair, and it weighed can you imagine? I forget how much it weighed. About 2 pounds of hair they cut off every year. That's a lot of hair. But anyway, he was on a mule. Kings rode mules. And he was riding a mule, and he went under an oak tree in the heat of the battle. I don't know if he was fleeing or whatever. The mule got spooked, but he got under some type of oak, and that big old mass of hair got wound up in those oak branches, and the mule ran out from under him and left him dangling in the air, and he couldn't get loose. And as you recall, it was Joab. They said, Absalom's caught in an oak tree. And David had given specific orders, don't kill him. Well, Joab went over and took the situation in and took some spears and killed him. So he died in that battle in an oak tree, he was caught in a web of his own making. And he died. That's what happened to him. He got killed. Yep. So, all done? Great. Any questions? God help us to be men and women of integrity. And men and women of integrity weigh their words, careful with their words. And if you do overrun your headlights, you back up, you say, I'm sorry, you admit to it, you apologize, you deal with it. And then you move on and hopefully learn a lesson. All right? Pastor?